The flag bridge of the Kirov-class battlecruiser smells like cigarette smoke and electrical equipment. September in the Barents Sea. Late Cold War. Outside the armored windows, gray water meets gray sky in a seamless line of nothing. Inside, beneath humming fluorescent lights, a row of Soviet admirals in starched uniforms stand motionless, watching a wall of radar screens pulse green light across their faces. This is Exercis Sever 83, the pride of the Northern Fleet, a carefully choreographed demonstration of Soviet sea power designed to prove one thing: that the Red Banner Fleet can seal the North Atlantic and strangle NATO supply lines in 72 hours. On the plotting boards, red grease pencil arcs show overlapping fields of fire, long-range search radars, fighter patrols, surface-to-air missile batteries, anti-ship cruise missiles. It is, on paper, impenetrable. In every war game in Moscow, this system wins. Then a symbol flashes on the status board. One of their cruisers has been declared hit. Multiple simulated missile strikes, amidships. The admiral nearest the board frowns. Seconds later, a destroyer reports the same. Mission killed. And then another. The radar picture hasn't changed. There are no inbound tracks, no missile trails, no obvious threat. The air is as clean and orderly as it was 5 minutes ago. But on the Exercis net, reports cascade in like a collapsing dam. Ships across the formation are being destroyed by something they cannot see. The Soviet Navy has spent 2 decades building a fortress at sea, not to project power across oceans like the Americans do, but to deny them access. Sea denial. It is a doctrine born from geography and necessity. The Soviet Union has long, vulnerable coastlines and a handful of strategic bastions: Murmansk, Vladivostok, the Black Sea, where their ballistic missile submarines hide beneath the waves, waiting to unleash nuclear fire if Moscow gives the order. Protecting those submarines is everything. The American carrier battle groups, with their jets and precision weapons, are the primary threat to that mission. So the Soviets build walls, massive surface combatants bristling with missile tubes, submarines prowling the deep, long-range bombers armed with anti-ship cruise missiles, layered air defense networks stretching hundreds of miles from shore. The theory is sound. Keep the American carriers far enough away that their aircraft cannot reach the bastions. Force them to fight through waves of threats before they ever get close. In exercises, in simulations, in the minds of Soviet planners, it works. The Americans, with all their technological sophistication, will be ground down by sheer weight of fire. Attrition warfare at sea. Steel against steel. Numbers against reach. But the Americans are not fighting that war. They are fighting something else entirely. Something the Soviets do not fully understand until it is too late. A U.S. carrier air wing is not a collection of aircraft. It is a system. A single organism with dozens of moving parts, each one designed to complement the others in ways that multiply their effectiveness far beyond the sum of individual capabilities. At the center is the carrier itself, a floating city of 5,000 souls and 80 aircraft. But the real weapon is not the ship. It is what launches from the deck. E-2 Hawkeye early warning aircraft, ungainly turboprops with massive radar dishes mounted on their backs, orbit high above the fleet. They see everything, hundreds of miles in every direction. They track surface ships, aircraft, missiles. They coordinate the entire strike package in real time, adjusting routes, calling out threats, managing the electronic battlefield from the sky. Below them, EA-6B Prowler jamming aircraft carry pods filled with electronic warfare equipment. Their mission is to blind the enemy, to turn that fortress into a maze of static and confusion. They do not destroy radars. They deceive them. They make the Soviets see ghosts, or see nothing at all. Fighter escorts, F-14 Tomcats, fly high and fast, ready to engage any Soviet aircraft that rises to challenge the strike. And then, low over the water, skimming just above the wavetops where radar coverage is thinnest, come the attack jets. A-6 Intruders and A-7 Corsairs, loaded with anti-ship missiles and guided bombs. They do not fly in a straight line. They do not announce themselves. They come from unexpected angles, using the curvature of the Earth itself as cover, timing their approach so that by the time Soviet operators realize what is happening, the missiles are already in the air. This is not a fair fight. It is not designed to be. The Americans have studied Soviet doctrine, dissected their radar networks, mapped their communication frequencies, and built a strike package specifically engineered to exploit every weakness in the system. And in September of 1983, during a routine NATO exercise shadowing the Soviet fleet, they prove it works. The strike is planned with surgical precision. Intelligence officers aboard the carrier pore over satellite imagery and signals intercepts, mapping the Soviet formation down to individual ship positions. They know the radar coverage, the missile ranges, the patrol routes of Soviet fighters. They know when the Soviets change watch shifts. They know when the admirals are eating lunch. This is not guesswork. This is data turned into advantage. The EA-6B Prowlers launch first, climbing to altitude and beginning their work hours before the actual strike. They do not jam everything. That would be obvious. Instead, they inject false targets into the Soviet radar picture. Phantom aircraft that appear and disappear. Merchant ships that drift off course. Enough noise to keep the operators busy, to make them trust their screens less, to create doubt. When the real strike package launches, the Soviets are already looking in the wrong places. The E-2 Hawkeye takes station far to the north, monitoring Soviet communications, tracking their fighters, feeding information back to the strike lead. The fighters, F-14s, fly a barrier patrol between the carrier and the Soviet formation, ready to engage if the Soviets scramble interceptors. They do not. The jamming has worked. The Soviets do not see the threat developing. And then the attack jets go to work. They fly low, painfully low, their radar altimeters screaming warnings as they skim 30 feet above the ocean. At that altitude, they are invisible to the Soviet search radars, hidden in the radar clutter of the sea surface itself. They approach from multiple directions, not as a single mass, but as a coordinated web of small groups, each one timed to arrive at the target from a different angle within seconds of each other. This is the key. This is what the Soviets do not anticipate. When the first group of A-6 intruders pops up over the horizon and launches their Harpoon missiles, the Soviet air defense systems finally react. Radars lock. Missiles are fired. But the attack is coming from 3 other directions simultaneously. The Soviet battle management system, designed to handle threats from a single axis, is overwhelmed. Operators shout over radios. Fire control radars swing wildly, trying to track multiple inbound raids at once. Jamming from the Prowlers turns their screens into blizzards of interference. And then, less than 90 seconds after the first missile launch, the exercise umpires declare the results. 6 ships hit. 4 of them mission killed, 2 more crippled. The flagship, untouched by weapons but cut off from its escorts by jamming, is effectively blind. The entire formation, the pride of the Northern Fleet, has been reduced to a collection of isolated targets, and the American aircraft are already gone, descending back to wavetop level and racing toward the horizon before the Soviets can even organize a counterattack. In the aftermath, the Soviet officers do not speak, not immediately. There is a long, heavy silence on the flag bridge, broken only by the hum of ventilation and the crackle of radios. One of the admirals removes his cap, runs a hand through his gray hair, and stares at the plotting board as if it has betrayed him. The exercise umpires, neutral observers from a third-party naval staff, deliver their assessment with clinical detachment. The Soviet formation would have been annihilated. The American carrier, never detected, would have retired to open ocean without a scratch. This is not a failure of courage. It is not a failure of equipment. The ships are some of the most advanced in the world. The missiles are deadly. The radars are powerful. But none of it matters because the system, the doctrine, the tactics, the assumptions, has been outmaneuvered. The Americans did not win by being stronger. They won by being smarter, by integrating their capabilities into a seamless whole that operates faster, sees farther, and strikes harder than the sum of its parts. The report from Exercis Sever 83 travels up the chain of command in Moscow like a shockwave. In classified briefings, staff officers present the findings to senior leadership. The Americans, they explain, are not fighting a naval war in the traditional sense. They are fighting an information war. Their carrier air wings do not need to destroy every Soviet ship. They only need to destroy enough of them, quickly enough, that the rest of the formation loses cohesion. And they can do that from beyond visual range, beyond radar range, using electronic warfare and coordination that the Soviets cannot match. There are attempts to downplay the results. Some officers argue that the exercise was flawed, that the Americans were given advantages they would not have in real combat. But the more honest assessments are grim. The Northern Fleet, designed to be a shield, has been exposed as porous. The Bastion strategy, built on the assumption that Soviet defenses can keep American carriers at arm's length, no longer holds. If a single U.S. carrier air wing can penetrate their formation during an exercise, what happens in a real war when multiple carriers are operating simultaneously, supported by submarines, by land-based aircraft, by NATO allies? The answer is unthinkable, and yet it must be thought. This is not the first time the Soviets have confronted the gap between their capabilities and American technology. In 1991, during the Gulf War, a single F-117 stealth fighter would fly over Baghdad undetected, dropping precision-guided bombs on targets while Iraqi air defenses, many of them Soviet-supplied systems, fired blindly into empty sky. That moment, the ghost over Baghdad would become legend. But Exercise Sever 83 is the naval equivalent. Years earlier, and just as devastating. It forces the Soviet military to reckon with a truth they have been avoiding. That the Cold War at sea is not being won by the side with more ships, but by the side that can see first, strike first, and vanish before the enemy knows what happened. The Americans call it network-centric warfare, though the term will not be coined for another decade. The principle is simple. Link every sensor, every shooter, every aircraft and ship into a single network, so that information flows instantly, and decisions are made faster than the enemy can react. The E-2 Hawkeye sees the target. The EA-6B Prowler blinds the defenses. The F-14 Tomcat clears the sky. The A-6 Intruder delivers the weapon. And the carrier, far over the horizon, orchestrates it all. Each piece of the system is lethal. Together, they are unstoppable. The Soviets, by contrast, are still fighting a World War II naval battle with Cold War technology. Their ships are powerful in isolation, but they do not talk to each other effectively. Their radars are strong but narrow. Their doctrine is rigid. And when faced with an enemy that operates as a single, fluid, adaptive organism, they are outmatched. This realization does not lead to immediate reform. The Soviet military is a bureaucracy, slow to change, resistant to admitting failure. But the lesson of Exercise Sever 83 lingers. It informs decisions in the years that follow. It shapes the way Soviet planners think about the North Atlantic, about their bastions, about the carrier threat, and it contributes, in some small but significant way, to the erosion of confidence that will eventually help end the Cold War. Because if the Soviet Navy cannot protect its own waters, cannot stop a single American carrier from striking at will, what hope is there in a larger conflict? There is a photograph, grainy and declassified decades later, taken from a U.S. reconnaissance aircraft during the exercise. It shows the Soviet formation from high altitude, the ships arrayed in neat rows, their wakes cutting white lines through the gray sea. It looks orderly, disciplined, powerful. But the photograph does not show what the Americans saw on their radar screens. It does not show the chaos on the Soviet radios. It does not show the admirals on the flag bridge, standing in silence, realizing that the wall they built is not a wall at all. It is a curtain, and the Americans have just walked straight through it. The Cold War at sea did not end with a single dramatic battle. It ended with moments like this, quiet demonstrations of capability that made the other side realize they were fighting a war they could not win. The Soviet Navy would continue to build ships, to conduct exercises, to patrol the bastions. But after Exercise Sever 83, something had shifted. The confidence was gone. The assumption of parity was shattered. The Americans had proven, without firing a single live weapon, that their carrier air wings were not just superior in technology. They were superior in concept. And in the end, that was the difference. The Soviets built a fortress. The Americans built a system. And when those two philosophies collided in the cold waters of the Barents Sea, it was not even close.